Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we have a packed agenda. The first item is going to be about by the Manhattan Manager for Community Engagement, New York Smoke Free. I assume that it's Stephanie Mercado Altman,
No.
is it? Or
Yes,
just-
it is.
Yes.
Yes, I
Well-
think she's having some connection problem right now because she's coming in and joining out, but I'm her partner. Hello, I'm Justine. I'm the Youth Engagement Manager of Manhattan.
Jacqueline is the manager for the youth division, right?
Correct. So she's the Community Engagement Manager while I'm the Youth Engagement Manager.
Would you like to begin or?
Yeah, if I
like-
could just get sharing privileges, we had like made a short presentation to present.
She has it.
Stephanie, are you with us? Okay,
I'm
great.
here. Hey.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Because they were calling your
Terrific.
name and I was like, okay. Okay, great.
That's Stephanie Mercado Altman.
Yes. Hi. Good evening.
Okay, welcome, and about to begin the presentation. We're looking forward to it.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Is it possible for the voices to be a little louder? Can you do that? And
I didn't.
For me to be a little louder?
Yes.
yes, it would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll try my
Thank you.
best to check my voice.
Thank you.
Great, so we'll get started. Thank you so much for taking the time to have us here. We're really excited to present. We are part of the New York City Smoke Free, particularly by the Borough of Manhattan. And I am joined by my partner, Stephanie Altman, who is the Community Engagement Manager, while I'm the Youth Engagement Manager. So a little bit about Public Health Solutions. Public Health Solutions is the largest public health nonprofit in New York City, and we're just like one of the arms of Public Health Solutions. So they do a lot with maternal health, healthy livings family in Harlem, and WIC program, and so many more. And our goal is to support the vulnerable New York City families in achieving optimal health and building pathways to reach their potential. And we are health equity focused. Okay. Now coming to New York City Smoke Free, which is what me and Stephanie work on, our mission here is to end the devastating tobacco epidemic throughout New York City. And our vision is that every New York City resident has the right to breathe clean, smoke-free air where they live, work, and play. And people who smoke deserve the support and resources to quit. How exactly do we actually do it? We do it through two means: youth engagement and community engagement. Youth engagement falls under my role, whereas community engagement falls under Stephanie's role. So limiting youth exposure and access to tobacco marketing and advertising of flavored tobacco products. We do that through various means, whether that's taking the students to store observation in the corner stores, convenience stores, dailies, and we regularly conduct these observations to just try to see how any store that you walk into, they have it like right baked there, like all these flavored tobacco products right next to candies, and having them think about how they are being targeted. Reducing tobacco imagery in youth-rated movies and youth-friendly internet sites. We continuously work with a lot of our partners and do a lot of New York City smoke-free events where we can talk about the harmful effects of having tobacco imagery, particularly in the PG-13 movies. Engaging youth and community partners to build support for a smoke-free city and end tobacco health disparities. We can't be we can't do anything other than like without the support of our community partners. So they definitely play an integral role in helping us achieve our objectives. Community engagement, Stephanie's role is increasing the number of apartment buildings, co-ops, and condos that are 100% smoke-free, increasing the number of smoke-free outdoor spaces, whether that's like businesses or recreational spaces, or someone who wants to have their building go smoke-free, they can come to Stephanie. So introduction to reality check. This is particularly something that we currently do. Well, I it falls under my role. It's a statewide program, so not just beyond New York City, designed for youth between the ages of 13 and 18, focus on tobacco control initiatives. The program is entirely student-led, adult-supported, and its aim is to reduce the number of teens that initiate smoking by exposing the tobacco industry. So I really like this code because now getting into the nitty-gritties, I think that this really captures really like what's the goal of tobacco companies, like what we call the big tobacco. And the code says today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer. And the overwhelming majority of smokers first begin to smoke while still in their teens. So basically what they're saying is that once we have the teens in, we basically have lifelong customers and we don't have to worry about like staying in business. And they really figured out different ways to stay in business. So why teens and how do they hook them? The earlier they start smoking, the more likely they are to become strongly addicted to nicotine. Almost 90% of the smokers started at or before age 18, even though you technically legally can't access smoke products. More than 13,000 of New York City public high school students currently smoke, according to CDC. And as a result, 1/3 of them are predicted to die prematurely. 45,000 public high school students in New York City reported regular e-cigarette vape product usage in 2017. Tobacco usage by teens. In 2022, nearly 1 in 9 middle school and high school students reported current use of some type of tobacco product. And the rhetorical question I get the audience to think about is, what kind of tobacco product do you think they use the most? And I think we all kind of know the answer here. It's the electronic cigarette, aka electronic nicotine delivery system, ENDS. And I don't want to really go into like how it kind of works, but I think one thing that I want to highlight on this slide is that there is no standard regulation of any of the e-cigarettes by the US FDA administration. So FDA does not regulate what goes in and if it's like safe or if it's if it's okay to do so. And I know that when they were introduced into the market, they were labeled or advertised as like an alternative if you want to try to quit smoking cigarettes, but there has been no research shown so far that it helps you quit smoking. In fact, it's actually more likely to get you more addicted to nicotine than traditional cigarettes. Some of the health effects of e-cigarettes. Most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, an addictive drug that research suggests can be just as addictive as cocaine, heroin, or alcohol. And smoke exhaled from e-cigarettes can contain cancer-causing agents, ultrafine particles, aerosols, and heavy metals. E-cigarettes are still new, so we really don't know. We are still learning about their like long-term health effects and how they really impact like the lungs and what are some of even the long-term effects beyond just that. E-cigarettes were the most common tobacco product used among middle and high school students. And although New York State has been doing really well with a steady decline in cigarette use, ENDS use unfortunately has increased dramatically by 160% between 2014 and 2018. And we see that the use of e-cigarettes is higher among New York high school students than adults, with 43.8% of students reported having tried e-cigarettes. So what we're seeing here is that the tobacco epidemic is not over. And, with the funding cut by the state, I think we need the resources now more than ever to support our youth generation. Some of the benefits that students have of joining RC chapters and how exactly do they look like? So we have chapters in different high schools and middle schools, and we're trying to reach into some in your areas as well. And they sort of work as like an after school program, aka like a club, and we meet like once or twice a month. And we have a lot of these discussions about how does like tobacco companies target the youth. And we also do a lot of events, whether that's like regional youth summits. We also have a legislative education day coming up where we take students up to Albany and have them talk to assembly members and state senators. So there's a lot of opportunities for students to get some grassroots experience as well. Developing leadership skills, strengthening public speaking abilities, engaging legislators on the issue. And also this is kind of like set in a way that it's peer-to-peer learning. So it's not just us going into the high schools being like, this is bad for you. Whereas it's the students that are engaging, they're people they know that vape, or people they see their friends vaping like left and right. So it's more about like helping them engage in conversations as to like, hey, I care for you, and these are the reasons why you shouldn't, and help is out there for you. And now I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Stephanie.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Jasleen, for that introduction and paving the way for our importance of why we're working with the youth. So I'm on the flip side, I work with the adults, the general population, when it comes to promoting smoke-free spaces in Manhattan. Primarily, one of my biggest charges is heading up the smoke-free housing initiative within Manhattan. And to note, I have worked with a couple of buildings, and currently I'm working with a building in the Upper West Side in MCB7, 150 West End Avenue, which I did help convert to a smoke-free building, and currently working with their sister building at 70 West End Avenue in the Lincoln Tower complex in the 60s. So making some movement in your area, but we'd love to make more of an inroad with other organizations, other buildings. But basically, just to give a quick background on what we do, or what I do in this work, is really encourage the development and implementation of smoke-free housing policies to be passed. And just to note that these are voluntary policies. These are not policies that are mandated by the city. They're recognized as an initiative within buildings to promote, safe living, healthier, cleaner air for people to breathe in their homes. And this work is done by partnering with landlords, elected officials, community boards like yourselves, and property managers and all the like in terms of the housing world, to assist in passing these smoke-free protections to go through. To date, our program has assisted over 54,000 families to live safely in their homes. And the services that we provide are around technical assistance from the end to end, to just making way in terms of educating residents on the importance of smoke-free housing. We also provided the templates for any sort of bylaw amendments, if it's a condo or co-op or policy for property managers to adopt, and any sort of referrals that are needed to legal or cessation resources that we are connected to as well. Oh, next slide. Thanks, Jasleen. I pressed next without even having control. Thank you. And in tangent with this, we also work on tobacco-free outdoor spaces. So this is helping businesses, other community entities in the area to promote outdoor spaces that are tobacco-free. So that includes not only cigarette smoking, but vaping and other substances as well that are in the combustible form. And in this work, we partner with health advocates, again, elected officials, community boards, and different enterprises in the community to promote tobacco-free outdoor spaces. And very much in the same way of smoke-free housing work, we provide the technical assistance that's needed, the policy templates that are provided for, and any referrals out that are needed as well for legal assistance or anything else. So pretty much the same work. Yeah, next slide, please. Perfect. So yeah, we thank you so much for having us this evening, and we wanted to just leave with a tangible ask of different, I guess, mini propositions from my side to Jasleen's side about what we can do, hopefully to work together. In the reality check realm, if there are connections that you may have in your high schools that are in your jurisdiction, to counselors or staff as counselors, or school personnel that work in middle schools and high schools, that would be great. And part in the CB6, we have presented this to other community boards, so we do mean CB7 for this evening. And additionally, working or connecting to local organizations who are youth focused. Would love to connect with any sort of youth that are in after-school programs or volunteer programs, things of that nature. And if CB7 has opportunities for me and Jasleen too, I would say I kind of run in tandem here for tabling. Would love to participate in those things as well. On the smoke-free housing side, if in tobacco-free outdoors, in those dual initiative areas, if there are introductions that can be made to major developers who are building in the jurisdiction, that would be awesome. I will be candid, after the pandemic, it's been quite difficult to connect to property managers, and shifts of priorities have occurred. So if there are possible bridges to build in this way, that would be greatly appreciated on my end, as I've been having trouble connecting with newer and existing buildings as well. In addition to, if there are concerned tenants that come to your community board with, issues of being involuntarily exposed to secondhand smoke, we'd love to be connected to them. And this can be smoke that is emitted from cigarettes, vapes, anything of the sort. And we would love to see how we can assist in that way. We'd love to connect with the people, but not just also with the property managers as well. And lastly, for the tobacco-free outdoors spaces are really any introductions that can be made to small businesses as well. I think this work is important not only in our homes, but also outside in the community as well. And lastly, if tonight we can offer a letter or some sort of small blurb for your newsletter or email blast, we would love that as well. Definitely would be happy to provide the verbiage for that and for the introductions that can be made to the different parties that we seek partnerships with. So we thank you so much and welcome any questions, comments, and we're here. Thank you so much.
It's not a question.
We are interested in having that type of blurb to work out for our website. Probably is the best place. Go ahead, Ethel.
Just a small thing. Did you mean to say CB6 for all of that instead of CB7?
No, they
didn't
have
update
done
They didn't update it.
it.
They didn't update?
No, they presented this to CB6 and they didn't update it for us.
Thank you. It was a little awkward as I was looking at
They
it.
have been working with it.
Sorry that I wasn't up to
Okay.
date.
No, you're
Uh,
good. You're fine. It was a mistake on our end because we have been massively.
Are
Yeah,
there new
go ahead.
buildings that are opening on the west side or anywhere in Manhattan that open as smoke-free buildings?
I'm
No.
sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Are there new buildings that
Yeah.
are open, coming online, that are opening as smoke-free buildings?
Yes, correct. Yeah, I've run into a lot of newer developments in Manhattan that have been going, of new buildings that have been going smoke-free from the onset of their construction. So, yeah, once those buildings are deemed smoke-free, kind of move on to the next.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I just have one real quick.
Please.
I think we've known about the effects of smoking and how terrible it can be for so many of us for a long time now. Is there any serious effort that you guys are working with legislators on to just try and outright ban the sale of cigarettes at a certain point? I mean, it's 100 years later that we've known the effects of it. So, I feel like we see the policy over and over, but then you walk in Central Park, or I work in somewhere that sits on a park and there are people smoking there where they're not supposed to. And, it just feels like we've kind of gone a few steps backwards recently, whereas 20, 30 years ago, it seems like we were actually making some inroads.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we do work very closely with our legislators, assembly members and state senators and the like. And we approach them more so with the fact that we are here as educational partners. We don't really work on the policy per se because of the nature of our funding. We can't lobby for legislation. But we definitely are the educational arms throughout the city that do help with, speeding up the youth to the dangers of vaping, or if it's working with housing partners or our community partners and the like, at storefronts, whatever it may be. Partnering with hospitals. We recently, actually, Jessie and I just worked with New York Presbyterian and Cornell, and did a Great American Smoke Out event. We do things like that, and hope that can lend itself to policy advancements.
On the policy and
Mhm.
legislation, if you can forward us anything, we have wonderful elected officials in our area. And in the past, they've been very responsive, so I'm sure they will be, and we'll be able to advocate in that way.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I will send that
Great.
over to, yeah.
So we thank Stephanie and Kathleen for coming out tonight. And
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Have a great
Okay.
holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're turning to the development and redevelopment of housing in our community. And I think what's important is that we focus on the differences in type of housing. People tend to put them in one box. And I think we're going to start with Paul Freitag, the Executive Director of the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing, who I'm sure that's one thing he'll be doing. So Paul, thank you for joining us this evening.
Great. So can everybody hear me? We're good?
Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent. So I'll have a very, very short presentation that I'm going to show. And I just also want to introduce Joel Spiegel, who's on the line. He's a project manager here at Wissfish and is in fact working on one of the new development projects that I'll talk about towards the end of our presentation. So let me share my screen. Hopefully that will go. By the way, I want to start by saying that all Wissfish buildings are smoke-free. So how's that for a transition from the previous person to this presentation? But let me share. Okay, can you see my screen? Right here we go. Share. There we go. Okay, you can see it now, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so what my agenda is here is just to most people have heard of Wissfish, but it's to quickly introduce Wissfish. We actually think of our portfolio, and specifically Wissfish in CB7. We really think of our portfolio as falling into certain groups. And so I really want to take a moment to talk about the different groups, like how we organize our buildings. Specifically because this is often very important as we're developing new buildings, and there can be confusion about, who's going to live in these buildings, what kind of buildings are these? So, okay, let's get rolling here. Okay, hold on. Let me go over here. Okay, so first, always start with our mission statement. So Wissfish's mission is to provide safe, affordable housing and supportive services to older adults that enhance the independence and dignity of each person. We strive to preserve and protect housing for low-income persons in our communities while supporting the development of healthy neighborhoods. I want to stress that one of the things that really makes Wissfish unique is that many housing not-for-profits really just focus on housing. They build or operate housing, they collect rent, they're all about the real estate. And then they will often partner with other not-for-profits that really focus on social services. And likewise, those not-for-profits don't necessarily know about real estate, but they know all about providing social services. One of the ways in which Wissfish is very unique is that we both, develop, operate, and manage all of our own housing, and then we also provide all of the social services that go on within our buildings. And we feel like this is extremely important because it really allows for, we feel, the best coordination between sort of everybody in the building towards the greatest benefit for our residents. Okay, so we are actually soon to be celebrating our 50th anniversary. Wissfish actually has 30 buildings in Manhattan and the Bronx. We have about 450 employees. We have about 2,400 affordable residential units. And then in we run 3 senior centers. Our 3 senior centers are each altogether serve about 1,600 seniors in the community each year. So, we have this idea that we serve about 4,000 seniors a year. And the other way in which we're unique is that most nonprofits our size would really operate anywhere in New York City. And we've really made the strategic decision to limit the geography in which we operate. So, we originated on the Upper West Side. We have the greatest densities of buildings on the Upper West Side. But in the last several years, many of our new developments have actually been in the Bronx. And you don't really see it because there aren't that many dots in the Bronx, but all of our Bronx projects are actually very large. And we've actually now found ourselves as the largest provider of affordable senior housing in the Bronx. So we actually at this point have a presence where maybe 3/5 of our buildings are in Manhattan, focused really on the West Side, and about 2/5 are actually located in the Bronx. And then here is CB7, and in Community Board 7, we have 14 residential projects and then 2 older adult centers. So you can really, see this is really the center of, sort of where Wissfish is located. So now I'm going to go through the different types of housing and how we think of our housing at Wissfish. And CB7 actually has examples of really 3 of the 4 types of housing that we do. One type of housing we do, there is not an example of that in CB7. So the first type is what is referred to as transitional housing technically, but which everyone else calls shelters. And Wissfish actually, in our entire portfolio, only operates 1 shelter. It is Valley Lodge. It's a very, very unique shelter. It's one of the only shelters in New York City that serves specifically a senior population. And for those of you who, I would assume most people know this, but really what makes a shelter is that it is taking residents who have directly out of homelessness and then helping them to stabilize their lives so that they can then move into permanent housing. So the whole idea behind a shelter, it is not permanent housing. Typically at Wissfish, people live somewhere between 6 and 9 months in Valley. I mean, 6 months in 1 year, averaging about 9 months in Valley Lodge before moving on to permanent housing. We're very proud of the fact that after a stay in Valley Lodge, very, very few of our residents, less than 1%, actually will end up back on the street. So we really focus, really on making sure that the time in Valley Lodge is very fruitfully spent to help the people there, stabilize their health, both physical health and mental health, get them prepared to be homeowners, and then not homeowners, renters, and then place them into housing that will continue to support them. Okay. The next group of housing that we have 3 big examples of in CB7 are what we call our creatively supportive housing. A lot of people refer to these as SROs. And what these are is typically, they're older buildings where the resident has, sort of the equivalent of a dorm room. That room might sometimes have a shared bath, but a shared bath where they share with just one other person. But more typically, there's say a couple bathrooms on the hallway that are shared by everybody on that hallway. They might have a fridge, they might have a sink in their room, but it's really, think dorm room as the housing type that then has shared kitchen and bath facilities. These buildings by definition do not, are not necessarily have to have meals programs, but actually Wissfish has found that nutrition is often a concern for the residents of our SROs. And so actually all of our SROs operate meals programs. Typically, this consists of a breakfast and a dinner, and we do it in a congregate setting, which really helps for the residents to build connections with one another. And we really feel that the meals programs in our SROs are really integral to their success. The next is what we refer to as our independent housing. And the way I always characterize our independent housing is that the residents of this housing, their big issue is they just don't have enough money. And so we provide housing for them that actually, with rents that they can afford. And, essentially residents in these buildings, typically can do their own shopping, they can do their own cooking, they can live quite independently. But even though that is the case, we do still have social workers in all of these buildings, but those social workers are focused more on making sure that the residents are getting the entitlements that they deserve to get, are helping them with manage their health, are helping them with sort of end of life planning, aging in place, different issues like that. And then all these buildings often typically have very robust building-wide activities to build community among the residents who live in them. The one type of housing that is not present in CB7 is we have 3 buildings that we call our congregate care buildings. And the way I always characterize those buildings is they're almost like assisted living for formerly homeless seniors. So these are buildings where not only do you get 3 meals a day, you get very intensive personal services, help with showering, coordination of your home health care aides. Typically, the residents of these buildings are people who are living with mental illness, and these programs are very focused on allowing people to live in community who might otherwise be institutionalized. So we have 3 buildings that are like that. One is actually in Chelsea, one is in Harlem, and we have a third one that's in the Bronx. And then finally, we operate 3 older adult centers that I'm very, very proud of. 2 of them are in CB7. One of them, the one pictured here, is from the Red Oak Center. And why I really like this, you may not remember, but the final sentence of our mission statement is that we're committed to really building healthy neighborhoods. And I really see our older adult centers as the way in which Wistfish, very actively every day gives back to the community and really extends our expertise in, caring for seniors, beyond just our residents, but out into the community. Finally, I'm so proud because Wistfish has had a really great week. And last week we had actually two big stories in the New York Times, both of which focused on our relatively new project on West 108th Street. And just when I thought that it couldn't get better, today actually the New York Times featured Wistfish in a video. So I encourage all of you to go to the New York Times. And today there's a video that also is essentially, it's a video version of one of the articles. And it too features the West 108th Street project. So I'm very, very proud of that. And now to talk about our two new buildings. So on West 85th Street, we will be beginning this spring to redevelop the 3 Arts building, which is a building that we acquired from the city as a relocation site for our Valley Lodge shelter while we were redeveloping it up on West 108th Street. So once the shelter residents were able to move back up to West 108th Street, we now are in the process of redeveloping it. It will go into construction this spring. Construction probably lasts somewhere between 1.5 to 2 years, and then it too will be permanent, independent, senior supportive housing. This building is a very, very beautiful building, and one of the sources for doing the redevelopment is actually historic tax credits. So the redevelopment is going to be done in a way that's very respectful of the existing historic fabric, both of the building and of the block that it's on. And then our other new development project, which we actually are coming back to CB7 next month to present about, and we'll bring along our architects and representatives from HPD, is what we consider to be phase 2 of our West 108th Street project. At the time that we developed West 108th Street, there were 3 city-owned garages that were essentially slated for redevelopment as housing. Our phase 1 utilized the site of 2 of the garages, and the 3rd garage, which is actually on the east side of Annabella Villas Playground, will now actually be demolished and also redeveloped as affordable senior housing. So it's sort of phase 2 of the project that we've already done. Joel is actually the project manager for that project. And we'll be coming back to talk about that in a little bit less than a month. So that is my overview. I'm happy to answer any questions about affordable housing in general or Wistfish. I guess the one thing that I will hold off on is I don't want to talk so much about our phase 2 project on West 108th Street, just because we'll be talking a lot about that when we come back in a few weeks, and we'll be bringing along other people who will show pictures and also talk about it.
Any questions?
Can you talk about the 3 Arts building and kind of the costs associated with renovating it and how that might have changed between when the city financed it and what the costs are looking at now?
So, this is excluding acquisition costs. The project was acquired. It was a building that was at risk of becoming market rate housing, and the city helped Wistfish to acquire the building actually in 2017, 2018, well before the pandemic, with an eye towards that it would be the relocation site for our shelter, which it was. And so at this point now, the redevelopment of the building, which is taking what was formerly essentially 120, almost kind of like monk cells, if you can imagine it, tiny, tiny little rooms that we're redeveloping as, so let me go back so I'll get the number exactly right. We're redeveloping as 61 studio apartments. The cost of doing that work the construction cost is going to be somewhere in the sort of $30 to $35 million.
And this is just, as the historic tax credit, are you finding that the standards you have to meet are increasing the cost of that project?
Oh, it's funny. It's I hate to say it's like a question I don't even ask, because it's such a beautiful building that I couldn't imagine doing a project that didn't respect, what a beautiful building it was. We're working with a very good historic consultant. We've been working with landmarks. You know, it actually has to go through the whole New York State SHPO process and actually be put on the Federal Register. And my sense is that, you know, we've had people working with us to really try to minimize the costs, but in a way that, you know, really respects the historic, you know, fabric of the building.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a spectacular building. If you're not familiar with it, it's just gorgeous.
Roberta, please.
It is an absolutely gorgeous building, and I just want to personally commend you for maintaining the integrity of the building. And it shows that Wishfish really cares about the people that are going to be living there. And anyone that has not seen the project on 108th Street, it also shows how well you can build affordable housing that is really well built and makes people feel good to be living in it.
Well, and I have to say, as many people in the room know, you know, the first phase of the 108th Street project, you experienced, you know, pretty severe community opposition, and I really want to thank CB7, who was a real supporter of the project. And I encourage you to look at the two New York Times articles. Both of them really highlight the community opposition that the project surmounted and able in order to be built.
You'll find many communities where you can't build anything because of the community opposition. And that was a big difference here. Seema, please.
As you think about new projects to bring on board some of these services that you offer, what are the biggest challenges that you find? Is it acquisition?
Interestingly, for us, I think what people don't realize, and we're spending a lot of time really advocating around senior supportive housing. You know, there's a lot of talk about supportive housing or affordable housing, and I think what people don't realize about senior housing is that probably it has the lowest income residents of any affordable housing in New York City. And so, you know, when you talk about affordable housing, you're always talking about AMI, area median income. A lot of affordable housing, you're talking about, you know, 60% area median income is sort of the threshold. If you want to really make it affordable, you're going to make it 30% area median income. And a lot of our buildings, the average income of the residents, because they really are on, you know, just getting Social Security, nothing else, is around 15 to 16% of AMI. So, you know, they are so low income, they actually don't even qualify for a number of the programs that are used to build affordable housing. So we won't build a building unless we have a commitment that every single resident in the building will get Section 8. Because really it's the only way for the project, you know, to be affordable to the seniors that we rent to. And since Section 8 vouchers and Project Section 8, which is what we typically use, is a very precious resource, you know, we find getting the commitment for the Section 8 to be one of the most limiting factors for us moving ahead with our developments.
Okay, and then
I'm trying to get a sense of what the need is compared to what you're able to deliver.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue. I'm sorry.
No, I just like maybe what the how long the waiting lists are, how many are on, and things like that.
Right. So, you know, what's interesting is that some of our waiting lists, you know, come from citywide processes. Others of our buildings, the waiting list is internal to the building itself. This is just a legacy of kind of the time and the period during which the project was developed. So to say, you know, take the Red Oak, which is one of our buildings that has an internal waiting list. You know, that waiting list got so long that if you got your name added to the waiting list, it could be 15 or 20 years before you could actually qualify for an apartment. And remember, you already have to be in your 60s to qualify for this apartment. So frankly, the likelihood of you living long enough, you know, to actually be able to move into the building, you know, was challenging. That on some of our buildings, we literally have closed the waiting list. We just are waiting for it to no longer be, you know, 10,000 people. And then once it gets down to a certain level, we'll refresh the waiting list. But that may be several years after we close it. The other, for as far as citywide demand, on our West 108th Street project, it's an unusual project for us, partially in response to the community and in response to the requirements for the funding. It's one of our very, very few buildings that actually has just plain old family affordable housing and not housing that's specifically for seniors. So we have 70 units in that building that are family affordable housing. And they had to come, mostly it's smaller units, so not big units, but they had to come in through the city, lottery system. And for those 70 apartments, we had 70,000 applications. So, I mean, just to give you, I mean, so essentially, 1,000 applications for every single apartment. So it gives you an idea of really just what the overwhelming demand is for affordable housing.
Oh, yeah, two-part question. One, how was Wishfish funded? And then secondly, what's the best way that CB7 can help Wishfish?
So Wishfish is funded, because remember I started off by saying that we're not only a real estate not-for-profit, we're also a social services not-for-profit. So in general, there's a whole host of ways that affordable real estate is financed. Typically, there's rent subsidies that we get, there's operating subsidies that we get in order to literally run the real estate. So that's sort of a big part of our funding. That's probably 2/3 of our funding. And then 1/3 of our funding, because we're also a social services not-for-profit, is through city-state contracts, actually even some federal contracts for our social services. So, our finances are actually very complicated. It's almost kind of like we're running, two businesses in one. And then we actually, I will say recently, we've been making more and more of a concerted effort to go out for private funding, going out to foundations, et cetera. Historically, Wishfish really just relied on its public money, but we actually are trying to diversify more and get more private funding, particularly for some of our new initiatives.
Okay. And then how can we help?
The way you can help is, each time we do a project, let's suppose we could do a project completely as of right. We would still bring it to the community board. We would still bring it to the community. We try to do our projects very transparently and have people, understand what we're doing to reduce the fear factor, have them realize that affordable housing are good neighbors. So I think, in the way that CB7 did a really extraordinary job on the first phase of our West 108th Street project, I mean, whatever you can do to sort of yourselves be informed and educated and help your neighbors also be informed and educated about affordable housing. And just let people know that, affordable housing is good neighbors and that it's, makes for diverse, rich communities and, essentially to support our work that way. That's I think really, what I think is the biggest way in which you have historically helped us.
Can I just say, I don't know if having been around at the time when Wishfish began to try to develop housing on 108th Street with the garages, I have vivid memories within the community board of the battle for the new housing on the part of so many in the neighborhood and the need and the fervent concern that residents would be losing garage space. This may sound strange now, but it was extraordinary. I was very deeply involved, and of course, Shelley is the man who really has been the man who's heading the board and all. And I remember, and there's an awful lot to say. I think that I've kept a lot of the history of that, and it also the Red Oak and the Marseille and others. It was both. It invoked the goodwill of many people in the neighborhood to develop housing, and because Wishfish was always so good, in my view, in the way they presented, in the way they responded. But I think, and I mean, I'm talking to the man now who's been fighting it out, but in the many, many, many years, the battles were strong. People got educated. the angers were there, but finally, the victories, not easy, were quite remarkable. There's one I remember, please tell me, was it the one where Wishfish had the building, I think, and then it had to come to the community board, remember, because there was also another owner or something, and then we had to battle
Is that Euclid Hall?
It sounds like Euclid Hall.
Yeah, that was Euclid Hall. And I think,
The commercial part remained with the
Aria Brothers,
owner,
the landlord.
landlord,
right,
and there were demonstrations in the street outside
yes,
with no one inside. You know, while it was being renovated, I was actually assaulted. Okay, you're not from this part of the neighborhood, things like that. And these same people then came, if I can just share this one thing, came to our community advisory board and were arguing that we should take some of the people we weren't taking because they have an aunt or an uncle like that. Okay, the people who had recent substance abuse history and violence and other things. And they were fighting with us to take people who we couldn't take. Eventually, they stopped coming to meetings because they didn't have a fight. Things seemed okay. But one kept coming and said, could you clean off the side of the building that faces our building across the street? And that's what that person remained there for, to give priority to the cleaning off of the building.
Yeah.
So what people's interests are, people, as Paul said, people, there's a fear factor. They don't know what it is, and educating the community is that sometimes it doesn't work. You have people who are going to be angry anyway, ongoing. Our best example was the Safe Haven.
Yeah.
6 months after it opened, people asked, when is it opening? And it was hell to pay for so many months among people yelling and screaming about those criminal. Well, they knew the whole profile of the people without ever meeting them. So there's still education needs to be done, and there are new people coming to the community who never went through the history. But I think, as Paul said, that's one thing we can do. The information is being shared with us. Communicate to the community, show support. And yeah, but Paul is amazing. He can juggle many projects very well at the same time with a wonderful staff, but he's extraordinary. Okay. Please.
Just to add to
Oh,
that,
thank you.
We had 4 or 5 meetings with Wishfish leading up. Paul came to the board with some of his people. We had smaller committee, we met with the housing committee, then we had larger meetings, and then we held hearings, and we held them up at the school across the street from where it was going. We had people from the parks, Wishfish would come, and people were concerned. And we had at least 3 hearings between the time that we had the committee meeting, and we had 3 joint committee meetings, hearings, and then finally the board vote. By the time we got to the board vote, Wishfish had made some major changes that the community had asked for. So it was a dialogue back and forth that they hadn't realized that, the community had a need, we didn't know the need. And it was a really very impressive project, the design.
And the
The city, the Central Park ambulances were housed in one of the garages.
Yeah.
And they don't fit in normal places, so Wishfish built them with their own little garage. We wanted more windows onto the street so that, if you're walking down the street and not living there, it would be safer. And they did that. So there were a lot of accommodations that were
including
made, including working with MS-54. And that the MS-54 people were on board by the time we got to.
and building bathrooms into the side of the building for the village playground. That could not get a person, a parks person there without bathroom facilities. And a few other things. Also, the phase 2 that we'll hear about next month was a compromise also. They said that one garage would remain open for it'd be 5 years. Many of us said, well, this is ridiculous, housing is more important, but making peace with the community, sometimes requires.
I think one of the more remarkable moments for me was there was a lot of opposition from MS-54, which I eventually became very happy. They became happy with me, but they did not know that Valley Lodge was there. They thought it was a new use. And when I kept telling people that had been there for 30 years, they were astonished.
If I may just say with that, Valley Lodge has the reputation so wonderful. There is a place for temporary housing. It's a shelter. And yet over the years, they not only were terrific in taking care of the people who got there, but the surrounding community and others didn't know that it was a shelter or that it was something that was going to be a blight on the community. And in so many ways, I mean, I learned a lot because I would go and take a look and help, but to be able to achieve that over so many years, and the changes and the fixing up again of Valley Lodge, it's an incredible, terrific victory, and I think among many, a model of what a temporary shelter can be, and yet become something of an asset to the community and to the people who were there.
Let Seema have the last word.
Yeah, I just had a question about phase 2 of the 108th Street project. Which committee is that coming back to? Is it?
It's coming to, Wishfish requested that it comes to housing and land use.
Yeah.
Got it. Is it a ULIP application or?
It's not a ULIP.
That's not you,
Oh, it's just a informational presentation?
Information, but it's also HPD will be there, so.
And the architect will be there too.
And the architect, so, we'll get a good picture of what's going on.
Great. And is that coming in December or?
The request was in December. I think that Beverly Max put it on the,
Oh, I didn't realize. Got it.
on the agenda.
Fantastic.
Right, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but where this, this large rectangular site to the west, that's phase 1. The middle rectangular site is the playground. And then obviously the site in the red circle is the phase 2.
Yeah, got it. And was that all under your original ULIP
Yes.
application?
Yes, it's come through ULIP already. It's just that the deal was cut that we wouldn't do the second phase until 5 years after construction began on the first phase.
Got it. Great.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul.
No, thank you for inviting us. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next month.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Keep up the good work. Here in person, we have Larry Wood, who's the Director of Advocacy and Organizing for Dotted Riverside, an amazing organization in itself. And I don't want to embarrass Larry. Sarah Lee and I could probably spend 15 minutes lauding your credits.
Don't believe the hype.
We don't want you to be embarrassed.
But I want to say that Judge Sarah Lee Evans hired me at Goddard Riverside back in January of 1987.
1987, and I remember it was a Saturday, it was a pouring rainy day with a hurricane. And you came on your bike. And then nobody was there, it was a closed office.
I don't remember that part, but.
Very clear. So we had
to a legend.
Right.
But Larry's been there for what, 37
years.
Wow. Can't keep a job.
Can't keep a job. And I also live right here on 85th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam. I moved into the neighborhood in 1978, so been my rent stabilized. Yes, 3 rent-regulated tenants left. And I was the tenant organizing here at Euclid before Wishfish acquired it. And I remember Reverend Laura Jervis regretted the 99-year lease she gave the Aria brothers who had the building. And it was about 40% empty. There was a pretty significant harassment campaign to empty Euclid Hall when Wishfish acquired it. Remember some of the tenants in here, Lou Polikoff among many others. Sarah Lee probably remembers Lou.
Yeah.
But anyway, memory lane. So I'm gonna do a share screen and hopefully this will work. I'm gonna do a tiny presentation about Goddard, but then really hone in on our housing and homeless programs and give you a sense of what we're doing, some new projects underway. And we're always looking for new SROs to preserve as supported housing. And I'm gonna make that point more than once, that we're preserving existing housing. When people look at supported housing as a new facility and they lump it in with shelters, I find it really insulting because we're only preserving a fraction of the SROs that had been here, and we've lost so much low-income housing. Preserving a fraction of them while all the luxury housing is developed is so important. But when people lump it in as a new facility that's being put in a neighborhood, they really don't know what they're talking about. So I'm going to make that point more than once.
So in our district needs statement, every year, we have a budget, our capital budget priorities. And one of our budget for the last, I think, 7 or 8 years, one of our top budget priorities has been keeping SROs, making them more.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can sort this out. Minimize that. Don't need to see me. Present.
That's the drone roll.
Present already. Looks like I did it. Okay. So Goddard Riverside, if you don't know, it's a settlement house. It has a long history. And unlike many social service agencies, it's a settlement house. The current director and the prior 2 executive directors had a real passion for advocacy and working with the men and women and families in our programs to identify issues we can take collective action on. So we really see our programs as cause areas. So let me see if I can advance this. Here we go. So get that out of the way. So this is basically the first thing, website. We work every day for a fair and just society where all people have the opportunity to make choices to lead better lives. Okay, so we have a whole history book, but the predecessor agencies of Goddard Riverside actually go back to the 1850s. Goddard Neighborhood Center was actually in the East 30s. It was named after Warren Goddard. It originally was the Friendly Aid Society. He passed away in 1900 and it was renamed Goddard. Riverside Community House was at San Juan Hill, down here where Lincoln Center is. And when that urban renewal came in, Riverside House was evicted from that area and merged with Goddard and moved here to the Upper West Side and became Goddard Riverside. Initially, we were in a brownstone on 87th Street. We'll go through all the history, but we've merged with several smaller settlement houses, St. Timothy, St. Matthews, which was on 84th Street, Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center, which we merged with a number of years ago. It was actually Goddard returning to where we had evicted in 1959. And then more recently, we've merged with the Stanley Isaacs Neighborhood Center on the east side. So we're now serving all of northern Manhattan. I think when I joined the staff, we were about 200 and we're up to about 700 staff now within a whole variety of programs. So just gives you more information. We actually have 3 sites in Queens, a safe haven, and we're administering 2 sanctuary sites for asylum seekers in Queens. So these are our program areas. And I like to think of them as cause areas. And the byline is the outcome we're seeking in these programs. So we're preparing children and youth for success. We're supporting self-sufficiency. We're enriching the lives of older adults. So those are the outcomes we're looking at each of those programs in our various cause areas. So under children and youth, we have early education, pre-K. We have after-school programs. We have beacon programs on the east side and west side, and then the different summer camp programs. Also, Degrees is a collective. It does a lot of advocacy work around education equity and access to college. And then the Star Learning Center is mentors who work one-on-one with young people, and it's located over there, St. Timothy, St. Matthews. Supporting self-sufficiency and financial independence. It's the Option Center helping folks go on to higher education, learning to work as an alternate high school, moved from the west side over to the east side. And then we have a whole education workforce development, which we acquired when we merged with Isaac Center. Enriching the lives of older adults. We operate 4 older adult centers. We used to call them senior centers, but I'm now a member myself, and I have my little DIFTA card. So we have 2 here on the west side at Lincoln Square at West 88th Street, which the community board meets at occasionally. Then 2 over on the east side at Taft Housing, which is Nitro Housing, and at Stanley Isaacs. And then the north are naturally occurring retirement communities. So these are buildings that have become de facto senior residents because so many people are now older adults. The west side one includes some of the Mitchell Lamas as well as the NYCHA building at 92nd Street, which is, I think you saw a B, but it's 74 West 92nd Street. So those are in the North programs. We also have Phelps House, which is a Section 202 senior housing at 88th Street. And then we have Meals on Wheels on both the east side and west side. We don't serve this neighborhood with Meals on Wheels. We got Washington Heights, and we have a big chunk of East Harlem. Okay, promoting behavioral health and wellness. So these are our mental health programs. IM team and ACT teams. These are particular programs funded to work with folks with intensive mental health issues. They work with the person no matter where they are. If they're homeless, they're in jail, or in a hospital, or in supported housing, you get the same consistent social worker. Or what they found in the past is somebody who had a lot of troubles would have to change social workers depending on the setting, and that they fell through the cracks and weren't getting the help they needed. So this became a really good model. The top clubhouse is the Other Place. That's a mental health clubhouse program, and it runs on the other side of this. It's in the church here on 86th Street. Top opportunities in the Greenkeepers. You've probably seen Greenkeepers out there in the streets, sweeping up the neighborhood and doing a lot of cultural work and planting bulbs, etc. So fighting homelessness and supporting housing for all. These are, again, what we're seeking. Our homeless outreach was known as Project Reach Out when it opened in 1979 under Diane Sandy. And when we opened the program, Bernie Wall, who was executive director at the time, said our goal was to close it down. We didn't want to be in the permanent need for doing homeless outreach. Unfortunately, the program's grown over the years because the need has grown. But our goal is to close the program down because we don't think we should be in the business of having to do homeless outreach. So supporting housing for all is really the goal. We have a safe haven out in Queens, known as the Baxter. We're hoping more safe havens get developed. And then under supported housing, Capitol Hall, the Senate, 140th and Corner House are buildings we've had for some time. And I'm going to talk a little more about them in a minute. And then the law project, which I'll also talk a little more about, where Sarah Lee and I both worked. Strengthening families and communities is just one other aspect of Goddard with our community arts program based at the Bernie Wall Center, which is at 647 Columbus. We have a resource center, which is kind of like a Robin Hood type of funded program where people can go in and sign up for a whole array of entitlements, and they can just provide information and they'll be told you're entitled, you can sign up for this, that, and many other programs they might not be aware of. And then the advocacy and community organizing is what I do in working with all of our program and cause areas to identify issues and work with the people we're serving to take some action. So under the housing and homelessness, I mentioned, Project Reach Out. And early on, Project Reach Out worked through this model called continuum of care, where people had to jump through multiple hoops before they were housing ready. And that's hard to do. How do you overcome alcoholism if you're still homeless? So a new model eventually developed was known as Housing First, is now a national model where you rapidly rehouse somebody and then you work at all the things they need to stay integrated into that community. It's a model that works. It's helps stabilize and get people reintegrated quicker. It's not beloved by housing managers always because folks still have some challenges sometimes. But it has worked and it does work, and that's the model now for rehousing people. Okay. So one of the programs, of course, was the SRO Law Project, which opened in 1981. Goddard Riverside was part of a coalition known as the SRO Tenants' Rights Coalition. You're not quite aware, there was 165,000 units of SRO housing back in 1971. New SRO housing was banned in 1956, I believe the year was. You couldn't build new SRO housing except for a nonprofit. Like a dormitory, schools could build them, etc., but private landlords could not. And the idea was we wanted to get rid of that substandard housing. But if you get rid of all the low-income housing and you don't build new low-income housing, homelessness grows. And that's certainly what manifested over the decades. But the SRO Tenants' Rights Coalition, one of the demands was the creation of a legal service office for tenants. And the West Side SRO Law Project opened up at Goddard Riverside in 1981. Sarah Lee was the second director, and I got hired there in 1987. And there was an East Side SRO Law Project that's part of what was MFY, now MFJ Legal Services. And they still work with SROs and so-called three-quarter house tenants around the city. And we still specialize the law project. It's now known as the Law Project because they're working with apartment tenants through right to counsel. But they still have a specialization and they work with SRO tenants on the west side between 14th Street and Upper Manhattan. And one of the things I just wanted to mention about the Law Project, the organizers and the lawyers, the organizers like to think of the lawyers as a support staff. So, and they are. The organizers do casework, they do building organizing, and they're also involved with a lot of advocacy campaigns, whether it's the end apartment warehousing or the Housing Justice for All or the Red Guidelines Board. It's a really important aspect of the work of the Law Project is working with West Side tenants and tenants in Harlem where they do a lot of work now and getting them involved with the housing movement. So I mentioned Project Reach Out now. Known as MOC, the Manhattan Outreach Consortium. It changed during the Bloomberg years. Mayor Bloomberg decided he wanted one contractor per borough to do homeless outreach. And at the time, there were 5 different nonprofits doing homeless outreach. And at the time, Goddard Riverside had to make a decision. We believed in community-based services. Do we want to bid for a contract to serve all of Manhattan, or did we want to walk away from that work? So what we did was we reached out to the other nonprofits and we bid as a consortium. So we won the contract. I think there was the alternate was the Bowery Residents Committee was the other bidder at the time. But we created a consortium with Breaking Ground and a few others. And that's what now is Goddard Riverside. During the day, different agencies are responsible for outreach, but 24/7, 365 days a week, outreach workers are out there. So we have the weekends and the overnight teams, which are very hard to staff. You can imagine trying to do this work year round on holidays, not easy, but we have some really great dedicated staff. Transitional housing, that's a tool that we helped develop, a safe haven. Initially, we had rented beds right over there, 106, 108, West 83rd Street, now known as a safe haven. We rented what we called stabilization beds at the time. And what the idea was, we wanted a tool to offer somebody who was chronically street homeless. They're avoiding the shelter system. They won't go in. They have all sorts of issues. But we could offer them, we have a room for you. There's no curfew. You can come and go. That was a type of transitional housing that somebody would say, yes, I'll try that. So it was a tool for our outreach teams to engage somebody, get them off the street, and then stabilize them, figure out how to fill out their housing packet, and then get them into permanent housing. That became known as a safe haven. We went from stabilization beds and developed this model as a safe haven. So when that building on West 83rd Street, 2 blocks from where I live, was designated as a safe haven. I knew the history of it. I said there couldn't have been a better building on the Upper West Side because that's where the safe haven model actually was developed back in the 90s, earlier 90s when we first rented rooms there. And it transition, the safe havens are important, and people, average stay is maybe 6 months to a year before people can transition into some permanent housing. The problem we're finding is folks who are undocumented, because there's no papers that you could fill out that they will be able to move into permanent housing. So that's an issue that we're trying to work with. And then, of course, permanent supported housing is really what we're aiming to do. And Goddard also helped develop that as a model. Capitol Hall is an SRO on 87th Street, 166 West 87th Street. Goddard acquired it in 1983 with the block. There's a wonderful, it's a video, we got to get it into a DVD, but it's called Yes on My Block. The Block Association was instrumental, along with Goddard Riverside, in acquiring that building and preserving it as affordable low-income SRO. At the time, there wasn't such a thing as supported housing, and we didn't have social workers in there at the time, but that all developed over time. And if you go to the Supportive Housing Network's website, there's a wonderful video about that history of supported housing. And the SRO provider group, when Wishfish and Goddard and Catholic Charities and other nonprofits started acquiring the SROs, they used to meet at Goddard, and they were called the SRO provider group. They got a foundation grant, and they spun off and became the Supportive Housing Network of New York. So both, we developed a model of safe havens, we've developed a model of supported housing, which really is seen as one of the solutions for folks who formerly homeless and have a lot of needs. Phelps House, that's section 202 housing. If you've been over to our older adult center, upstairs is our senior housing. So some updates. The Senate is one of the SROs we acquired also in the mid-90s. It actually been somewhat abandoned by the prior owner. There were 2 different drug dealing operations in it. There had been a murder in the building right before we acquired it. It really was quite the hellhole. I don't know all the history of how we acquired it, but it was really our second residence. It's now undergoing renovations. If you're familiar with the building, the security desk is at the back of the lobby. We're pulling it up to the front, so as people enter the building, we'll be able to see them. Linda Rosenthal, who chairs the Assembly Housing Committee, lives literally next door to the building, and she had never been in it. And we actually took her on a tour about a year ago, and she was really amazed at seeing the building and the interaction. The director of our social service team was doing the tour, and we come out the elevator, 1 floor, some tenants were squabbling and something was happening, and she just went over there and calmed things down. And so Linda was impressed with the building, but she was also impressed with the social service team and seeing the interaction with the staff and the work that was done. But the rooms are small. It is an SRO with shared facilities. And it was interesting seeing Linda looking out the window and seeing her building. She says, I've never saw my building from this view before. But it was important to have the housing committee chair of the state assembly there to see the building and educate her about it. And now she's trying to get us some capital money to help with the renovations. Another building that's under renovation now is the newest SRO we're preserving. It's going to be named as Stephen Riso Residence. He's a former executive director. He felt a little odd because he's still alive, having a building named after him, but it's under renovation. Originally, it was about 90 units, but had shared bathrooms, shared units. So it's going to be smaller. It's 54 units of supported housing and 14 units of affordable housing. And there'll be an application process, actually, for some people who might want to get in there.
Are there some current tenants?
There's 8 current tenants.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think.
Great to have a building
Among the
named after yourself while you're alive.
Maybe he felt odd about it.
Stefan Russo coming here and all the work he did and remarkably running out at Riverside. And then when I heard, what, they're naming a building after him, and it's sort of great that he just loves it.
Yes.
Well, Michael Bloomberg did that, while his daughter was at Princeton, he named the building after her.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Bloomberg, he was really embarrassed about it.
Yeah. Same ending, but different way of doing it.
So,
And the people who were in, so the people who were going in there, where did they start out?
well, they're rent stabilized SRO tenants, so they've been there, for a long
And
time.
I mean, the people who are going to come in, the supportive housing part.
Well, 60% of the vacancies, are referred by Department of Homeless Services. And then 40% of the vacancies are community rooms.
And it's permanent, it's gonna be permanent.
And it's permanent supported housing. And that's actually one of the early victories of the SRO provider group, was advocating for community rooms in addition to the supported housing.
Mhm.
We didn't want buildings to be exclusively with people with special needs or high needs. Because just low-income people need that, there's the housing as well. So many of the SROs, Euclid here too, they're, I don't know the exact ratio, but I think 40% is supposed to go to community members as opposed to referrals from Department of Homeless Services.
Louisa?
And,
I just want to clarify
Sure.
on this. The supportive housing, that is recommended, those people are referred by DHS, but the other part, the 14 affordable,
Mhm.
is that the community lottery?
um,
Where do they,
no, we have our own wait list. It's nothing, there's not a community lottery.
okay, what is the difference between affordable per se and supportive, which is also affordable?
Well, I guess they don't need the social workers necessarily. Probably, I wouldn't argue with
But they're
that.
probably entitled to the services, but they don't, are.
You get more services, not if you're supportive.
Yeah, because of the folks who are coming in on the supported housing categories, tend to be formerly homeless. They might have mental health, they might have, one more addiction issues or addiction issues they're grappling with. So.
They have to, if they come in as supportive, do they have to engage in the services? What if they don't want to? What happens?
Well, if they're able to manage and pay their rent and live peaceably with everybody, it's not a big issue. The problem is if they're not respectful of the community and they become a problem, if they become a hoarder, and they fill up their room with garbage, we have to deal with that. You can't endanger the other people in the building. If you're a drug dealer, I mean, if things go haywire, we have to hold people accountable. We don't like evicting people, but sometimes you do. It's a responsibility we have to the other people in the building and the community, but it's the last thing we want to do. We really go through every effort to try to get people to engage services, get the assistance they need so they can live there in the community with others. But occasionally something doesn't work out. There have been times but again, it's the last thing we want to do. But if people are ruining the community and becoming a problem in the neighborhood, you have to act. You have to do something.
Thank you.
What I wanted to mention too is, if you go to Goddard's website, it's not in the PowerPoint. The housing section, you'll see information about the sanctuary sites we're operating in Queens. This is new. We've done outreach, we do safe havens, and we do permanent housing, but we've never operated shelters before. This city has been leaning on various nonprofits and Goddard to take over the administration of some. I mean, I can understand you don't want to keep paying Doc, Gov, or Go, whatever that. These for-profit entities were making a lot of money on running these facilities. They wanted to get them in the hands of responsible nonprofits to run. And, I understand they're looking still for new facilities, and we might be asked to manage additional ones. But there's also, I think I heard the news that I think for 19 straight weeks has been less and less migrants coming into the city and less of a need, and they're actually starting to close down some. So we'll see where that goes. Yes.
So you started to say that, the sort of pipeline that typically happens for people in shelters is there's some permanent housing in the future. What happens for this community of migrants?
You mean the undocumented ones?
Yes, yes.
Well, we don't have a place to house them, so some are staying in safe havens. But there's just not a lot we can do if we can't fill out the paperwork and get them, the documentation so they can graduate and move into permanent housing. So that's, I think, might become an increasing problem, not just for us, but for anybody trying to run these kind of facilities. I mean, if you run across somebody's homeless and you get them to take a bed and get them off the street, and then you find out we're at a dead end in terms of being able to move them into permanent housing.
Yes.
So it is we have to figure out what to do eventually.
No solution yet.
Do they get connected with like legal resources that might be able to assist them for?
We
seeking
try,
asylum?
yeah, I know there's some attempts at that, also connecting them with their own nationalities, perhaps, sometimes there's aid for, groups from Africa or Ecuador, or one place or another, you can try to get them in touch with folks. I'm not doing that direct work myself, so I'm not familiar with all the steps.
I know there's free legal services for the migrants that are being bussed in. I know there are lawyers.
Not enough lawyers.
That, of course, there's not enough, but yeah, but,
In theory, there's a right to counsel for tenants in housing court. And thousands of tenants are going to housing court every day without their attorneys because it's not enough.
yeah,
So having that right and having an actual lawyer is two different things.
yeah.
Two other things I just wanted to mention in terms of just housing and housing affordability and preservation. There were two reports that I sent to the committee. There was an SRO study back in 2009 with all these recommendations about preserving SNOs and an inventory of all the SROs left in Community Board 7.
Yeah.
So I sent that to, who's the committee chair? Housing, Shelley and
No, that chair of housing is SEMA.
Oh, SEMA.
Sima. Okay, so you'll see that.
Oh,
I sent it to you earlier, probably 2 hours ago.
2 hours ago.
Yeah.
That's why.
And then there's another report, the preservation and expansion of non-market rate housing in the Upper West Side. Molly Liu did a huge report that she presented at Columbia University, but it's a huge inventory of all your affordable housing stock in Community Board 7. And she
What year was that? Because
That's the one we did.
She did it,
Yeah, that's-
May 2023.
right, because I remember Louise was supervising, I did some work.
No, this is later than that.
Yeah, she,
No, that's one.
No,
No.
this was my intern,
Yes, that's who it
my
was.
fellow.
Your fellow.
your fellow did a great job in this report.
Last year.
Not gender, but fellow and
Yeah, but it was a year or two ago, but we really, it was a good job. And yet there was a lot of needs that still were not contained there.
There
And
was
the
some problems with
methodology wasn't easy. So we should begin to think as a task of trying to see how workable that is. And then to get as up to date a picture as we can of the SROs.
It'd be very nice.
Yeah, the SRO report is dated, but this is, a lot more up to date.
Yes,
There's
okay,
nothing-
yeah. Mhm.
And then she covers all the stock, and I remember when somebody had sent her over, I said, go talk to Larry, he'll help you out. So she quotes me in the PowerPoint early on, because I took her outside, and I said, one of the things I really love about this community is the diversity, because we're far too segregated as a city. So I'm pointing out, I said, here's public housing, here's a luxury housing, here's a Mitchell-Lama, here's a supported SRO, and here's rent-regulated housing. And she took that quote and put it in her opening about that mixed housing neighborhoods can provide valuable economic and cultural diversity. And I think it makes for a healthier overall community. So I, heard you talking about trying to figure out the various types of housing stock. So if it's NYCHA, Mitchell-Lama, rent stabilized, she did a really good inventory, came up with a lot of recommendations about preserving it and tools for developing new affordable housing as well. So if you haven't seen it, again, I forwarded it to you guys.
I didn't get it either.
Well, I'll make sure you guys get it, because I,
That would be great.
I'll keep forwarding it until it gets through. It was, the documents were too big, so I was getting messages that they were being
Are
rejected.
those the documents you said were too big?
Yeah,
I think you sent them to me.
I sent them to three
I
people.
didn't open them all. I mean, I opened the first page, but I didn't.
Look at them.
No, they came late, so.
Yeah, and I said, may send these off because these are reports you guys should have. Because they're about Community Board 7, people did a lot of work.
If you send them to Seema and Tibbet, that would be.
You sent it to us.
They didn't quite come through. If you don't mind sending it.
Well, I don't.
I'll send them again as individual documents so they get through.
I have it.
Oh.
I just want to say that
Both of them? There are two reports.
The SRO.
I'll send you.
2009, I think I have it someplace. The problem was that it was, as you said, dated. Yeah, most of those buildings no longer exist as SROs. The recent report, okay. And I supervised her, and we had some major problems on it. I just have to say that hopefully the data, all of it, some of the problems made me have problems with the data. Such as that she described Lincoln Towers as a luxury development. And I said, no, and I said it was developed as, you know, unions and middle-class housing. Middle-class housing. So we had a lot of going back and forth on this.
Okay.
That she did a lot of research, she did a lot of work. But in many ways, when you read the report all the way through, she didn't have that good a grasp on the community of what made it. I mean, the Lincoln Towers thing was one of the more striking ones.
Right.
There were a lot of problems, a lot of meetings going back and forth and going, look into this and do this, whatever. Which is one of the reasons that we didn't distribute it that much.
Mhm.
I'll go back and take a look at it also because I respect you and, you know,
But
you
I think,
probably are more conversant with some of the distinct data.
right. And but I think it's a useful tool for you to see what you have, because I mean, if there's gaps in there, and things that need to be done, you don't want to go back and reinvent the whole wheel, you know, even if it's a wheel with a flat tire, just gotta figure out how to fix it.
It's a good point. Yeah.
She was a fellow from,
Let me just.
Columbia.
no.
No, Baruch.
No, it's Columbia.
No, she went to Columbia, but she was a graduate student at Columbia. But the fellowship came from,
The city.
The fund for the city of New York, I think.
The city of New York, I'll think of the name of it, but we've got over the years, we've gotten urban fellows. From.
I'll just pass it around, people to
Yeah,
take a
but
peek at it.
it's been a mixed bag,
Yes.
unfortunately. Louisa was supervising work like hell, and did very well.
I had a lot of breakfast.
But the students did not have the kind of support academically and then didn't know where to go. And so, and then I was asked to look at it as well. So it's an imperfect report. We may still have some use for it, but in any case, we could know what the gaps are and to see if we could make better use.
From Columbia that she
Exactly.
had.
Exactly, and that was unfortunate and not necessarily helpful.
Okay, Larry, good? Yeah, I guess I wanted to close, one of the things I sent was a list of the advocacy and coalitions that are underway for federal, state, and city advocacy. We don't have time to go over all of them. But you know, there's housing justice for all on the state level. They fought for good cause eviction legislation, which is new. So so-called market rate tenants actually now have protections if their landlord owns over 10 units. They're entitled to renewal leases, and there's a cap on rent increases. And then, Shelley, I just wanted to bring to your attention the thing I'm just passing around. Shelley had asked me a couple of months ago about how much it costs to do homeless outreach, and I gave him a breakdown of our work. But we're being threatened with a huge budget cut. And that's what I'm sharing here with you is our homeless outreach. And this is all the organizations that are doing homeless outreach throughout the city. You see Project Hospitality in Queens and Bronx Works and the others. We're losing what's called hotspot funding, which is going to expire December 31st, which would require us laying off outreach staff. So
Or is this federal, estimated federal coming in?
this was city money that I don't know where they got it, if it was state or federal money. But it was money used to expand homeless outreach, and it's expiring. And so it's going to result in a reduction in staffing for homeless outreach in the middle of the winter. So there's an advocacy effort underway to try to preserve this. And potentially the community board maybe can do a resolution or a statement saying we shouldn't be cutting funding for outreach to the chronically street homeless throughout the city. It's just something I wanted to bring to your attention because we had spoken about it about a couple months ago. So anyway, Goddard's in the business of trying to, preserve existing affordable housing. Again, we do a lot of work with NYCHA tenants. We've done work with Mitchell-Lama tenants. We're certainly committed to preserving what's left of the SROs as supported housing or other appropriate needs. And the remaining SROs really have become NOCs, naturally occurring retirement communities, which is a handful of the permanent tenants left because over the years, the attrition and the other uses, whether it's AMDR and colleges, net leasing, or tourists, whether it was legal or illegal tourist rentals. There's so much more lucrative uses of the SROs at the permanent and hotel stabilized tenants. There's really very few left, but they're still out there. They're still out there.
What do you guys do? What do you guys do with the NOCs primarily?
The NORC programs have social work staff. A lot of it is kind of just in activities to keep people socialized, but also.
I mean, Goddard, what is it? How does Goddard mainly interact with the NORCs?
Well, we run NORC programs and we actually get funding from the city.
Oh, okay.
Just finding buildings that are norths and then.
Yeah, well, I guess different groups that do it, they'll look for buildings that have over 50% of the household, head of household. I think it's 50, it might be 40% is seniors. And then it could qualify. And then when the Department for the Aging puts out a funding for new NORCs, different groups put proposals for. So we put one forth for the West Side, two Mitchell-Lamas and that public housing building. And we're operating the West Side NORC aquatically.
Yeah, I live in a NORC.
We do.
There's a lot of good programming. There's a whole office in the lobby and they have, you can even rent wheelchairs there. They have trip, not rent, I mean, just borrow a wheelchair. They have trips to movies, they have trips to the grocery store. They have like activities, a whole list of activities, like every day there's stuff to do. There's coffee and donuts.
Right, so a lot of it's group work, but there's also that individual work with tenants as well.
Exactly.
And like Lincoln Towers has a NORC, but it's not as good. It's not as good as.
Larry, we want to thank you very much.
Sure. Sorry, but I wonder about these waiting lists. What percentage of the waiting list actually finally get accepted because there's so much death and assisted living places, people find places to live. And I'm just wondering, we keep hearing about these huge ones, but what does it actually come down to in the end?
But there's the waiting list for the supported housing. We also have a waiting list for our section 202. That's the senior housing. Those waiting lists, as Paul described and Shelley, it could be 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes much longer. I don't know how long the waiting lists are for our supported housing. I'd have to check. Not a lot of people know they could, get on a waiting list for them.
Right.
So I have to find out for you.
At the end, when you have a vacancy and you start going down through the waiting list, how many people, what is the percentage that actually is available to take that apartment that hasn't died, gone to live with children, done something else, found some other facility.
Right.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I just don't know the answer, you know. It's probably site specific. Some of the section 202s don't have long waiting lists, but could be in East New York, it could be in other parts of the city. You know, I know ours is popular. I know Wishfish is popular, because they have good reputations.
Project Find is popular, you know,
Yeah.
it's just not, on the Upper West Side, it's just really good.
Yeah.
Same
Okay.
everywhere. People want to live.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So we're gonna take a look.
Yeah, I can print them out again.
We're gonna take a look very quickly as
Yeah.
a state senate bill. 2023 F 8907. I gave you, still, I'll just give you it's being supported by every person on the health committee at in the state senate, including Grant Hoylman, okay, our state senator. And basically, it deals with the fact that so many hospitals are being closed. That's particularly that serve the most vulnerable populations. We found them in Manhattan, downtown, in particular, and they're not replaced. And find they're engaged with clinics and so on, but not the same services. And the question here, and what's being addressed here, is that this urgent issue is directing the United States Department, New York State Department of Health, to complete a thorough report on the impact of hospital closures on its health care access in the state, focusing on specific challenges faced by communities that have experienced or at risk of such closures. And this hasn't been done. It requires a report. It just can't be done. A hospital just can't, that receiving state funds and other funds can't just decide. Have reports about the impact, what's going to happen in their immediate communities and the people they serve. I think it's a no-brainer in terms of supporting it, but what's happening now is it's going to go to the governor's desk. Okay, and if we don't opine and give our advocacy, and we're trying to get the other community boards from the borough board. Beverly pointed out that this was something people were really riled up about, and I think the more support from the communities, the better a chance for this to pass, or to feel some pressure for this to pass at the state level. So does anyone want to comment on it? I sent it to the HHS committee because it's HHS thing, but since we have everybody here, we can have the non-committee vote also. Any questions?
Is this prompted by the closure downtown?
What's it?
Is this prompted by the closure downtown of that hospital, Beth Israel?
Beth Israel downtown, and prior to that on 23rd Street. Can't remember. St. Vincent down there, and then in other parts of the state, in Long Island.
Yes.
Now it's supposed to.
In their comments, they talk about rural places in the state.
Yeah, it
Right.
seems to be a statewide issue.
It's a
Yeah, it
statewide
is.
issue, and they don't really.
Okay, but we know what's happened in
know.
the city.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna call for a vote of the committee, all in favor? Aye. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I missing anybody? Yeah, I got you. Okay, 6. And other committee members. So we have 7 committee members here.
You counting yourself?
You count yourself?
Okay.
Did you count yourself?
What, did I count myself?
No, I don't think you did.
Okay, 7.
There you go.
Thank you. No, Ira's not on the, and non-committee board members.
So it's the,
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Any opposed? So on. So, it's 7-0-0 and, non-committee members 3-0-0. Okay. And then the next thing that I handed out was something that, just, came to us in the last week. There's going to be a hearing on October 2nd. I'm going to speak there.
December, you mean?
December 2nd, is that what I said?
Yeah, the guy.
Oh, God. Okay, I feel like it's October. It's by Zoom, but they're having a hearing on the process used to inform and to engage the community about shelters, DHS facilities, and particular shelters that are coming. Now, we've had a long history of this, trying to get more earlier involvement, to get actual involvement. And I'll just give you the one recent example, which would have been a good model. Okay, what was 106th Street? There's going to be a facility there. And unfortunately, they didn't tell people in a timely way. That was bad. But what was good is we had a meeting up there, a committee meeting up there, in the Red Oak. So it was convenient for the people. So that's the first thing, being in a location that people could have access to who are most affected. In addition to an information session, which is what it was billed as, there were questions and we always have comments along with questions. But then one of the block association presidents said, why can't we move now? And they always say, the community advisory board will meet after it opens and you'll have input. And she said, why can't, so we don't have to call it a community advisory board. Let's have a representative group meet with you. So when it opens, we have everything worked out, all the issues, and then it'll be, accepted by the community and so on. And it actually happened. Okay? Right? And you were there, you knew that, you saw the whole thing. It was like, it was amazing, right? So here was a great example. And then they come out with policy where it's just going to be an information session. Okay? And, there's not going to be other engagement.
And it's late in the season that you get to know about it because they
Right.
don't tell you until they've chosen the site, they've chosen the group, they know how many beds it's going to be, and then they have a meeting with the community when it's a done deal.
This is exactly, also at 83rd Street, I mean, this is how it's happened almost every single time
Repeatedly.
recently.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
was-
the requirement is just 14 days prior to
Yeah.
opening.
Well,
And it is frustrating because
there was a memo from Mayor Bloomberg. He invited the 5 Manhattan community board chairs, I was one at the time, to Gracie Mansion for breakfast. And 4 of them started attacking him on everything, and I said, I know, he isn't gonna go nowhere. So I said, well, I want to compliment you on our rezoning and how the city planning commission went along with us, and we had a good process, and everyone praises the mayor as a result, because the mayor oversees everything. But unfortunately, with DHS, we have the opposite situation. We sometimes don't hear, and sometimes we get last minute notice. And I said, how about at least 60 days? So he sent out a memo that day. I remember Penny Ryan, our district manager, called me, you're not gonna believe it. A 30-day 30-day memo that from now on, the community must be informed, the community board, the elected officials and so on. Not adequate, but at least it was something. But we've had a good relationship with DHS, okay, in terms of communication and cooperation. But Beverly has asked me to speak at this, and if anyone has any things that they think should go into it, my basic point will be, there has to be adequate notice as early as possible. There has to be an information meeting, yes, but there has to be with questions and answers and comments, and then there has to be a process where the community stakeholders in the community that represent the community, the immediate community, have ongoing discussions with DHS and the provider so that things work out well to begin with, and all the difficulties are worked out. And if it's not going to work out, then there has to be, deeper discussions, but it's really, and I'm gonna give the example of what actually happened and why it worked in our community. So, unless, anyone have anything they wanna,
I would just flag that what works on the Upper West Side is not gonna work everywhere. And unfortunately, there are a lot of communities that do not want these things and are going to use this process to work to kill these shelters. So I understand that here, we have an interest and think that we have a community board that's supportive and is able to deal with opposition. And there has been a tremendous amount of opposition, even in this neighborhood that we think is so liberal and open. And I would just say that making these rules, even trying to say that these rules do not give enough notice for here, I understand that. But I'm just saying in Eastern Queens, that is just gonna allow Vicky Palladino to kill every single shelter that anyone proposes. So I understand that we on the Upper West Side feel like we eventually get to yes, but I don't want to give more ammunition to other communities that are not interested in getting to yes.
go ahead, please.
I feel very strongly you don't concede to people in Eastern Queens.
But we
You
do.
make the good fight. And we think that you should do it in a way that the community is involved and it works out well. 83rd Street, we weren't involved in, but we're involved in other things and it works out well. And if people in other communities have other problems, that's fine for them. But we have to advocate for what we want.
Yeah, I think it's like, we've had this sort of like philosophical question, like what is the onus on us to represent our communities or in consideration of like a larger city issue? And I think I'm personally up with the opinion, it's always on the, like, we're here for community board
Right.
7.
Right.
I understand your point.
Yeah, I mean.
I think it's just a philosophical difference.
Yeah, I don't think this is actually gonna change anything and get to any better outcomes on the Upper West Side. I think it will only lead to worse outcomes other places.
I
And
think
that's just my,
very
yeah.
cynical.
Sure, but this is the life, like, as a person who does permitting, this is how I feel.
Larry?
Yeah, Councilmember Gabru actually reached out to us about this as well, just wondering our thoughts on it. And it just requires a 14-day notice. It's not a hearing. They're not asking for
Right.
permission. It's just a hearing.
But you were saying
Oh,
you
let me
wanted
finish. Let me-
more,
let me
right?
fin- Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely to find out much earlier.
Sorry,
right.
Fran.
No. But
Find
one of
out
the
much
things we
earlier.
got back to Gail was, could we disclose earlier?
Yeah,
Because we're in a position, DHS and HPD don't want us announcing things. We have to fight. We're gonna operate the supported housing. We wanted to go to the community before it's built and let them know. And we've got permission on 107th, but DHS is very difficult. They want it announced after it's opened, after it's a totally done deal.
Yeah.
And I think even at 14 days, things can come up so that a provider can make adjustments or get input or create an advisory board or something. So, but I think more time is necessary. 30, 60-day
Yeah.
notice would be
And it
better.
can work, and maybe if people see there's a process that can work, maybe they'll consider it, yeah.
You have to forgive my ignorance, but what is the current regulation? Like how?
No
how
notice.
much notice-
They don't have to give any.
Regulation,
They don't have to give anything.
No,
No,
after they prefer to tell you after it's done.
It's usually after the fact, once the property's been, purchased.
So there's nothing statutorily that says they should give us
Exactly,
any notice.
and so, yeah.
Well, the new statute that they sent has a legend on top that anything underlined is new, anything in brackets exists, and one other thing, well, nothing in brackets was there. So, everything was new, everything was underlined.
Does everybody have a copy of that? Yes. That, it should, New York City Department of Homeless Services, yep, so I have some more.
So do you need a resolution for this?
No, we don't.
No,
I'm
you're just gonna.
just gonna
He
speak,
does it Queens, give 2 months notice.
we
Or they
discussed
find out 2 months after the
thoroughly,
fact, they're still gonna
Beverly
litigate,
and I
they're still gonna
discussed,
fight like
on email, what would be effective.
These regulations.
A resolution, they're not gonna read. Okay, they say, submit your letters, speaking out, the 3 minutes that they give you
We announced
is
it.
probably gonna be the most effective thing.
So we can get the litigation out of the way, we can still look at it on Scott time, because the lawsuits that tend to be frivolous.
Yeah.
So you give them more time.
Yeah, they gave us plenty of.
Like a
notice, 6
57
months
Street, they
notice.
jammed up that shelter for years because they had deep pockets,
I
but it
also
was more
tell you
frivolous.
your point that like, it's the people who say, when is the shelter opening, when it's been open for 6 months, who are the same people asking for more time. Like, I think all of us have worked in and out of government for a while, and there's always gonna be someone who said you didn't give enough notice.
Yeah.
There's no way for any government agency to make everyone happy on the notice front.
True.
So like, I'm sure maybe you just get a little jaded working in that, I'm sure what Adam is referring to, but it's like, it is just, I think at a certain point, there's always gonna be someone who said we didn't tell them early enough, so.
Yes, but
That's my
we
take.
for reasonable notice.
And that's what everyone says, right? That's the line.
And,
And
I think you have to push.
yeah, and when we've had it, there's been times over the years, we had one on 94th Street. That's when I was chair, it was during the summer, in the middle of summer, all of a sudden, they're opening a shelter and bringing.
Is this near the school?
No, that's the next block over, and it was terrible. We met with, the deputy commissioner, DHS, and we had many organizations at the table. And, that night was steering at that time could pass, resolutions during the summer. And everybody agreed that it was not a good idea, because I was familiar with the security firm and the social service agent, and they were both in the Bronx, and they were failing there, okay? And they were bringing them down, and they didn't have the plans weren't worked out. And the assistant commissioner acknowledged that and said, we will go back for further discussions. That evening, right here, 15 members of the steering committee, including, may she rest in peace, Barbara Van Buren, who was in charge of homeless services for Westfish. Okay, that was a lie. We did good. And what happens? 15-0, a liberal Upper West Side board votes that this shelter should not be, as planned, should not be set up. I won't go through the whole story. Next morning, it's supposed to be a press conference in front of the place. I show up with Barbara Van Buren, and there's no one there. Later on the day, we delayed it to tomorrow. Overnight, I got calls from people that busloads of 200 people came to inhabit that building. The rooms were less than a quarter of this space. No air conditioning, it was 95 degrees. Pairs of people put together who weren't couples and who had people who had difficulty with all kinds of problems. Okay, meal vouchers that worked in a very good facility hotel they were in Brooklyn, but you can't get anything at McDonald's with them here. You know, everything not filled out, everything was a problem. So the end of the story is our elected officials had met on Wednesday night at midnight with the commissioner and agreed if he did this, if he did that, that they would go along with it. So he moved them in. And on Friday morning, the borough president called me. I was furious because we got a 15-0 vote and a resolution to support the elected officials in opposing it. And we had all met and there was a process. And the borough president said, I won't use his words, did something effed up, okay? And I said, yeah, okay? And I said, but worse than that, we had something that process that was working and just blew it. So they put together a letter, 3-page letter, and the third page was where the demands were. And they sent it to me. I said, absolutely not. 1-pager. And on the first page, we want the people to have proper services in the location they are now or another one, that the people who are living there needed to receive services anyway. There were people living there as tenants. And third, that if the people were there that they would gradually be moved into better situations. We can't do that. So, well, then don't ask me. I wrote the letter. They were all agreed, they all signed off. The commissioner was furious, Commissioner Hess, may he rest in peace, okay? And who ended up, and then in his next life becoming one of the providers of homeless services.
This was Julian.
Yeah,
I think so.
John Commissioner Hess, yeah.
So what ended up happening at the end of the line is that the borough president, we were meeting at the borough president's office, and the commissioner said, we're going to make this facility another Euclid Hall. And Euclid Hall was a model SRO situation, definitely. And Linda Rosenthal said, you don't know who you're talking to. He's the president of the organization. I said, and with all due respect, Mr. Commissioner, you are not making a Euclid Hall. So he was furious, and our president said, why did you say that? So why did I say it? He has to hear the truth. Well, he agreed to remove the people gradually until the borough president and complete it on the borough president's birthday. The New York Post, who praised the borough president as not being a knee-jerk liberal and supported that individual every time he ran again, but not being, crazy stuff. But it was corrected, but we had large meetings with the people from the shelter. And they spoke publicly about how it was inappropriate, all the difficulty they were having and what they needed while they were there. And they were our partners. They were community partners because they found that we were willing to hear them. They were the ones most affected. But we had a lot, those are the ancient problems, but they can come back. Okay, and so we tried to develop a relationship with the Department of Homeless Services, who let us know, to meet with us, to be transparent, bring the information as it is here, even if people don't like it, okay? And see what compromises can be made to make it better for everybody. But this is scary, this is gonna be statutory, and that's what the problem is. When you don't have a statute, at least you have some flexibility. But this kind of locks you in and say, oh, well, we have this. So on that